just like we would use this for any artist that we work with, we use this for our own business. Like this is how Indepreneur runs, is largely based on the buddy system. And so
you are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Indepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. I am your co-host, Circa. With me is your other co-host, Corrin Campbell. Corrin, it's been a while since we had a regular old podcast episode. How's it going?
Things are good. Nashville is staying alive despite the rampant spread of coronavirus and a recent F3 tornado downtown. But we're all safe and sound here. And everyone is, helping each other out. That's the Nashville way. So, but otherwise, things are eventful, but good.
Coronavirus, tornadoes, we are truly living in the end times, everybody.
I know, right? It's crazy.
Well, I'm very excited about today's episode because it's about time that we took a little refresher course and helped kind of all the indies out there understand what we're trying to teach you at kind of a ground floor level. So we're going to take it back to the basics today in a big way, hopefully in a way that kind of reinvigorates people's knowledge. Because as we've learned through the founder program, our coaching program, which Corrin has kind of refurbished and made into this really awesome program. And we've learned through that like people kind of don't understand one of our fundamental concepts as much as we'd like them to, which is the buddy system. Hacky name, but really, really potent stuff for kind of understanding how to build a music or a creative career in general that requires a fan base. Any career that requires a fan base, the buddy system is an incredibly useful tool. But would you say, Corrin, that like people kind of haven't been getting the understanding of it that we thought they might have?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that, and, if you listen to the podcast, you're like, I have heard about the buddy system umpteen times. And the reason why is because people still don't get it. So, I mean, I think that the biggest disconnect is just that a lot of people come into the Indepreneur trainings or into our circle and they really want a to-do list. They want to be able to check things off. And, obviously tech tutorials are the things that feel most like that. And so that's where people just tend to gravitate. And they're like, yeah, but, I don't need to understand this stuff, or I'll get to it later, or I just don't get it. And it's a huge kind of problem. I think that if you don't understand these things and you don't know how to implement them into the tech, into these other things you're executing, then you're missing out on, what those things can develop into so that it is actually feeding your creative process instead of just being like a checklist of things.
Yeah. And I mean, so we're revamping our buddy system training this year. And we're also kind of revamping our onboarding process for Indie Pro, which is our membership service, to really just kind of force you to really learn the buddy system before you continue into these more technical trainings. And the reason being is that we really want you to end up at a place where you can build your own marketing campaigns and run your own stuff and not use our templates and not use our step-by-steps, because ultimately these are ideas that we've had in the past that we've replicated across a couple of different artists, but that doesn't mean that is now the standard, the gold standard for how you should do it, because ultimately the best marketing comes from a place where you understand, oh, okay, I know why these things are being done. So now I'm going to design something that accomplishes that and fulfills that why, but on my own terms and based on what I know about how I operate.
Right.
So a lot of, it's not one size fits all. Fan Finder might not be the most right thing as an introduction campaign for everybody. So we really we want you to know the underlying theory so that when you do use our strategies, do use our step-by-step kind of trainings, you're building a campaign for a specific purpose and you can see how the campaign fits to that purpose, but then you can let your mind wander as to what else might fit to that purpose.
Right. Yeah. I think that's something that I don't know, I wish I understood earlier on when I was, just coming into marketing stuff. And I've talked about this before, but I think that's why at the beginning of my career, I kind of lucked out, right? Because I didn't totally understand marketing. But I, basically was talking to fans and kind of evaluating what they were thinking, right? And that just naturally integrated into some of the things I was doing. But then when I was working with the Army and we started looking at KPI, right, and looking at our cost per lead and looking at our ROI and all of these other acronyms, right, that's when I there was a serious divide between the two things I was doing. I was doing things that were very fan-centric and were, just talking to fans on social and creating content that I knew they were interested in. And then my marketing stuff was totally separate and very, it was robotic almost. It wasn't really integrating who I was as an artist into it. It was almost like it was a separate function. And I didn't really unlock the potential until I was like, oh, these things go together tight. Then I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. And then I was able to do things that were really creative and it didn't feel like such a chore. And, so that's something that I kind of wish I had understood sooner. And we get emails in the Indies support channel sometimes where people are like, I don't want to have to learn all this. Just show me what to do. And it's like, yeah, we can totally do that, but you won't be able to use this in a way that is meaningful for you long term if you don't learn these things and how they go together and have fun with it.
Yeah. And I mean, in some respects, what we're talking about here, that kind of eureka moment where you're like, oh shit, I can actually plan these marketing campaigns by myself to my own liking. I can have my own ideas here. That probably not only comes with knowing the underlying theory, but some experience, which is kind of why we have the trainings, right? It's kind of like to get you off and like a lot of times the best way to learn how to write well is to rewrite what other people have written. Like great writers will sometimes sit down at a typewriter and just type out books that they're big fans of, just to get a feeling for what it's like to write something like that. Same with songwriting, like learning tons of songs and analyzing how they're written kind of gives you an understanding of how to write one from scratch. And so this is the same kind of concept. We want to teach you the underlying theory so that while you're rewriting our own strategies, and while you're going back through them and analyzing them and using them, you can start to see, oh, okay, this is done because of what I've learned on the theory side. That's why this is this practical application. And then you can start to say, well, it could be that, or it could be this. And a lot of that has to do with experience too. So it's going to take some time of actually like running campaigns before you start to see those things. Like for me, motivating certain sounds and effects in production took a long time, or is taking a long time for me to learn. Motivating lights in filmmaking takes like, I'm a year in and all of a sudden I realize like, oh, I could have all the light in a scene look like it's coming from a natural source, like, and why that's good and why you'd want that. And so it takes a long time to, Kenny Kaminsky just got back from New York. What's up, Kenny?
What's up, Ken?
One of our support team. But yeah, it takes a long time to kind of onboard to that stuff. But anyways, in this episode, this is a 2-part episode, so it's going to be this weekend. Next week, we're talking about Buddy System, but we really just want to make sure everyone understands what it is and why we use it and what it should help you with. And to kind of start that off with what it is, the Buddy System is an 8-step framework, right? I think it's 8 or 9 steps, right?
Yeah.
Let me see. Introduction, education, permission, nurturing, affirmation, ascension 1 and 2, referral, and advocacy. That's 9 steps.
9-step program.
It's a 9-step program.
That's
yeah.
Perfect.
So the Buddy System is a 9-step process by which we kind of compartmentalize different levels of awareness or levels of relationship between an audience and a creator. And so this is purely in a business context, right? Because obviously we could compartmentalize these things differently. And really the reason that we do this is a psychological reason. If you're trying to motivate a large group of people, then you need to know some psychology. You need to know about humans. And there's a lot of different ways to divvy up this like spectrum of I don't know who you are to like we're really intimately involved. And there's a great reference by, like, once again, shout outs digital marketer Ryan Dice always brings up. I think it's The Naked Ape is like this book where this behavioral zoologist kind of compartmentalized human behavior and different levels of intimacy. And so it starts with, I think it's eye to body, which is I see you, and then eye to eye, which is we see each other. Then I think it's mouth to mouth, we're talking, right? Or like voice to voice, rather, we're talking. And then like hand to hand, which is a handshake, and then hand to shoulder, hand to waist. There's like these different stages of intimacy between two humans. And so like some people just end up at one stage and they're like friends forever, right? They never progress past that. And you kind of know when like someone who's in the friend zone touches your waist, that is like, hey man, you know what I mean? So yeah, like it makes a whole lot of sense, but we're talking about it in a business context. So that means, are they aware of you, which is introduction, the first stage? If they're curious about you after they become aware of you, do they have a place to get more information? Did they get more information about you? This is a stage during which they're going to learn a lot about you. And you probably know this from when you've discovered a new artist and then like scour the internet for facts about them so that when you later tell your friend about them, you have something to say about it, right? You have a story to tell. Right. And that's kind of the education phase. Then there's permission, where you now become involved in a one-to-one communication channel with that artist as a fan. Now for like, you know, if you're a fan of a YouTube creator, this might be you subscribe to them. If you're a fan of an artist, you might sign up for their email or their text list. You might get involved in some way. And then there is nurturing. They're going to do cool stuff with you, ideally, so that you enjoy this experience, so that you kind of feel like, oh, I'm getting a lot out of this relationship with this artist. It's evolving. And that's this nurturing phase. Once you have contact information for somebody, typically you hang out with them. Otherwise, you guys don't become friends. So this is that hanging out phase. And then there is a deeper level of involvement. You're willing to do favors for each other. You're giving away free stuff or early access. They are purchasing products, purchasing merchandise, purchasing tickets. And then that ascends through several stages. Every time your fan does something for you, we introduce nurturing again, a nurturing campaign to make sure we top back up and we're not always asking and not giving. And then later on, there's stages where they're willing to promote on your behalf. They're willing to create more fans of your work on their own behalf. And this is the buddy system. So we use marketing campaigns to get people through each of these stages. Every single marketing campaign we run is meant to take people from one of these stages to another. That's it. That's all. That's how we base kind of everything, really.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because I am launching a membership site as part of my Greatest Hits release, and it's even informing that process, right? So if you were to look at the buddy system as a zoomed out basic view, membership would be somewhere up in, it would be partially ascension because, in theory, it's going to people who have purchased already, or into the referral and advocacy stages, right? It's ascension 2 and above is usually what that's considered. And, but in my membership, I've actually kind of spliced it so that there's a $1 membership. And this might actually serve as an affirmation stage, right? This might serve as the first time they purchase with me. And then there's 5 different points. There's even a free membership because some people may not even be ready for that. And so even my membership has kind of encompassed the buddy system in its own cell, even though a membership site would usually include, you'd kind of make some assumptions about the type of people who would be candidates to be members of a membership site. So Once you understand what the purpose of each of these things is, you also know okay, what content is the $1 person going to get versus the content of the gold tier, right? Which is the 4th level for me. What makes sense for this higher price point, as well as for a higher level of commitment? What's the kind of things that they would want to see? And so once you understand the buddy system in a big scope way, you can start breaking it down into the smaller facets of campaigns or products that you have. Because then you're understanding like, okay, I'm always in a place of trying to get someone to the next stage, whether it's through my membership, whether it's through my email, whether it's through my advertising campaigns, whether it's through my organic posts. I always want to have a way for them to keep moving up the ladder, right? So I think that's why we just keep talking about this. I mean, I think the last time we did a buddy system podcast was like a year ago, but it continues to apply. And I mean, something else, when I start breaking things into the buddy system, and I've seen our founders do this as well, that's when they start innovating beyond the standard fan finder method, beyond the standard ultimate album launch or free plus shipping and handling method, right? Like they have taken the understanding of those campaigns and then paired that with their understanding of the buddy system and then do something completely original, totally different. I mean, it's a spin-off, but it's so quintessentially them, their artistry, their fan base, and their branding. So I think that's, we just can't reiterate it enough because it can facet into so many pieces of your revenue streams and your relationship with new fans as well as your OG fans.
I think it's also one of the things we might have missed the last time that we did a podcast episode about this is that or what I think a lot of people don't realize maybe is that we're not talking about like the reason we're delineating into these stages is not so that you can like hope and pray that people encounter your assets that are meant to address these stages and like fall down this rabbit hole. The reason we do it is because we can manually address people at these stages. So for every stage, there is a set of audiences that are based on a communication channel. This is why this is all really important is because, for instance, if I have data about everyone who's ever interacted with my Facebook page, Instagram profile, YouTube page, there are advertising platforms on all of those platforms.
Right.
So I can exclude the people who know who I am from any audience targeting and make sure that I'm talking to people who haven't even been introduced yet.
Exactly.
So now I have certainty pre-introduction stage, right? But once introduction has to do with someone consuming the first piece of your content, first touch, first listen. Well, we can target those people as well. We can, in Facebook, 75% video viewers, Spotify listeners with Spotify ads, YouTube viewers with YouTube ads. There's Instagram profile visitors. There's all these first touch audiences that you can run an ad campaign to just that audience.
Right.
Once we get to education stage, it's kind of a little more fuzzy. There's not really direct targeting or direct campaigns there because ultimately, once you get people to consume your content, a lot of them are going to, if they really like it, educate themselves. And this has happened to me with my tests last year. I have tons of fans who have kind of scoured the internet for other stuff I might have and found it, maybe a couple hundred to 1,000.
Right.
And so that's really where the education stage lies. It's like, do you have content out there that informs people about what you're all about and gives them more stuff to check out once they do discover you in that introduction stage? But once you get to permission, we have a very definite communication channel and audience once again, because they're signing up for something. They're signing up for an email list. They're signing up for a text list or a messenger list. And you can not only segment them on that list based on their level of awareness or if they've bought something in the past, but you can communicate with just those people. So for every stage, there is a data set and a communication channel where you can talk to just that stage, which means we can craft a campaign to address people at all these different stages. If we've got a bunch of people on our email list who are hanging out, have received value, but haven't bought anything, we can send email to just them and say, hey, we've got a sale, a flash sale. We're going to lower the barrier to entry for actually supporting the creative career, make it easier for you to get in on the ground floor. That's kind of the purpose of like a flash sale in an email list, is to create those first-time customers, those first-time buyers. So the real value of this is not to just say, oh, and we know the psychology of your fan base and where they're going to go. It's not even that rigid, or it's pretty fuzzy there, but it's more that we can draft data sets that are specific to this level of awareness that we've defined.
Right. I mean, it's the closest thing you're going to get to an indicator of what's in someone's head, right? Like, I'm sure we all have that friend who you're like, what is that guy thinking? Like, why did he do that? Right. But if you really give it some time, you can be like, well, these are the things that person did or said, and those indicate something to me. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's 100% right all the time. But if you try to evaluate someone's behavior, you know better, probably, at least if you're paying attention, what you can do in the future to avoid or encourage similar behaviors in the future, right? So we do this with our family. Like, thank God my mom doesn't listen to my podcast, but my mom calls me a lot more than I need her to. Love you, Mom. And so when she calls, I have to kind of train her behavior because she'll keep me on the phone for 2 hours. And, I like talking to my mom. So I know that I'm also going to slip down that slope. So it's me understanding like, okay, if we get on the phone, I'm going to lose, especially if it's in the middle of the day, like I'm not going to be able to work because it'll be all this time. So I've learned over time, I can't answer the phone when my mom calls unless, unless I'm not busy. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to ignore it. And if I don't text her, then she'll call incessantly and ask if she needs to call 911 and if I'm okay. So then I learned, okay, I need to text her, and so you're responding to what people are doing. But when you don't have that one-to-one, like I have with my mother, you don't have that with your fans necessarily. Some of the higher tail fans are going to be that way, who are, very easy to read. They're telling you exactly what they're thinking. They're telling you exactly what they want. But for the people who are lower down in the line of progression, they're not necessarily going to tell you. Some will be assertive and tell you, but other people, you need to basically gauge these behaviors to say like, okay, what do I need to do next? Because there's a lot of people sitting here on my email list but haven't purchased. So there's a reason for that. I've offered them things. They've not purchased it. So where's the disconnect? Am I not offering them something that they want? Am I not offering them a good enough deal on what they want? And so these are the indicators that we're looking for, because until you talk to every person one-to-one, which is not a scalable way of managing your fan base, talking every single person, you have to use behavioral hints. And that's really, I think, that's the quintessential buddy system foundation, is like taking the hint or evaluating this behavior so that you can make decisions in relation to that segment of people. So, and that's exactly what Cirque's saying. Yeah. I think it's just, for me, I'm a super nerd, but in my day, I will evaluate my interactions with people, usually in the retrospect, and be like, okay, what happened there and what kinds of things I'm looking at it like the buddy system, right? Do I want to be friends with that person? How do I need to pursue that? Do I want that person to go away? What do I need? What hints do I need to take as far as what behavioral choices to make next? So I think it's actually a lot more natural than some indies think. We're breaking it down into something that's kind of formulaic in a way that is, it's something that can't actually be formulated. It's just the easiest way to summate the things that you want to do for these fan groups.
Well, yeah, it is. It's a direct corollary to human relationships, right? You meet someone and it's typical that an indirect introduction, maybe as a recommendation by a friend, is the best. That's why Spotify's recommendation engine is so potent. That's why recommendations from your friends about what music to listen to is so potent. Like, recommendation and discovery drives the music industry and a lot of creative industries. And so the introduction stage, it's that way for a reason. We want indirect introductions, ideally posited by a close contact, because that's the most potent in real life. And then education. Ultimately, we want people to sign up for your email list, right? That's the best business result that you could have if you're trying to build a fan base long term and make this your 9 to 5. But you can't just blurt out after you meet someone, hey, give me your phone number. That's weird. So we need to educate them. We need to have a little bit of a conversation. And then we need to offer something of value for the phone number. There needs to be a reason behind the contact exchange. So that's why permission. And so it tracks. We're going to go through every level of the buddy system in part 2, but it tracks really closely to like human relationship. But Corrin brought up another point, which is like, this does allow you to discern. So we talked about how the buddy system allows you to, okay, you can identify people who are at these different stages. They all correspond to a specific business result. So it tracks really well with your goal of building a business around your creativity. And we talked about how you can use marketing campaigns to move people from one stage to the next. But as Corrin said, you can also use these cohorts of data sets. And I don't want you to get freaked out by this, right? We're literally just talking about a MailChimp group or tag. Right. We're talking about, a Facebook ads audience, custom audience that you create in Facebook ads. So this is all stuff that you can learn if you don't already know it pretty easily. Don't get freaked out when I say cohorts and data sets. I'm just talking about these. But once you isolate them, once you say, oh, here's the people on my email list who have all purchased exactly one product. I have them in a list. And that's not that hard to get. If you have a Shopify store, you can figure all this stuff out. Then you can look at them as a data set. You can upload them to Facebook. You can do all sorts of stuff. And you can say, you can track the efficacy of different things messages that you address to that audience. So if you're running a sales promotion and it doesn't do too well, you can usually diagnose kind of where it went wrong. Was it the offer? Was it the email? Was it the landing page? You can diagnose all of these things because you can break your audience down into these cohorts and eliminate the number one kind of reason that artists end up sucking at marketing is because they talk to everyone as if they're the same level of awareness.
Right.
They're talking to it's one to many always. They're always talking to the whole group and the messages are not potent because of it.
Right. Yeah. It's something it's funny because I think that a lot of people, as I was saying in the last, they think that this is really complicated, but you do this every day, if you're at all self-aware, maybe you're not, but most people are, and they're thinking about how they want relationships in their life to progress, and like what they can do to do it, right? So if you buy your significant other flowers, you're obviously not trying to get rid of them, right? And you're either, trying to make up for a fight, or you're trying to either maintain or increase their affection for you, So this isn't really that different. It's just being able to identify who in your audience needs what, right? To progress to that next level. So I know I typically break my mailing list down basically any time that I'm having an email go out. It's broken into at least 3 segments, even if it's something that is, a very low level thing, like, oh, there's a single out. Even that I will break down into these different segments because what I need to say to them is different, right? If they've been on my list for 10 years, which the oldest subscribers have been on my list for 10 years, I'm not going to tell them about a new song, especially something as simple as a new song coming out. I'm not going to talk to them about it the same way that I talked about people who got on my list since the last one came out. Like that's just not, it's not going to cause people to want to take any action, right? So I think understanding that you don't have to get too wrapped up in thinking it's this really complicated thing as much as understanding, okay, how does this apply to my everyday life? How do I normally do this anyway with just people who are around me? And how does that translate into these different campaigns? Which is why the Buddy System Workbook is so helpful, is because it helps you take it from that in-person, real-life people thing into like, okay, how does the marketing campaign translate into that? And I think as soon as you start making a couple of those connections, then in your brain, like even the objectives that you put in your ads, right? Maybe you don't run a retargeting campaign as a sales conversion. Maybe you run it as, a reach because you're only sending it to an audience that you want to hit everybody because a lot of them are likely to convert anyway, whether or not Facebook thinks they're likely to convert, right? Like there's different things that you make adjustments in your marketing because now you understand who these people are and you're speaking to them very specifically.
Yeah. I think also like there's the reason that this is valuable is not only everything that we mentioned so far, but also because if you talk to your brand new fans in the way that you could be talking to, let's say, people who have already like purchased multiple things from your store, right? Or have already supported you in multiple ways. One of two things can happen. Either you're going to talk to them very inappropriately because you're really mean your message for people who are like really already down for everything that you do and want the next thing that you're going to release. They want to buy it.
Right.
Or you're not going to talk to those people strongly enough because you're kowtowing to the newer listeners. You're not doing as strong a sales message as you could. For instance, like if we have a sale that we're running, like in our company, or if, for instance, if I'm running a sale for an artist and I have a list of people who I know have already bought tons of stuff from them, I'm not going to write a shitload of copy. Right. Because it doesn't make sense to. I don't need to sell them. It's not like this is their first rodeo. They dig what this artist puts out. They want to know about it first. The only thing that's going to piss them off is that if you tell the new audience before you tell them.
Right.
So we just write an announcement, you know?
Yeah.
So it really changes the message, but you have to sell people who haven't bought anything yet. You need to write some copy, make it enticing. So that's kind of the value, is that like you by separating your messaging becomes so much stronger because you know exactly who you're talking to and you know exactly what, like where the psychology of them is at. And another thing is that a lot of this is automatable. Like once you start really cracking into the different campaigns that we've built to address these different stages and different challenges in building a creative career and an audience, a monetized audience, you start to realize like, oh, well, after permission, once I have a one-to-one communication channel, I can create email automations, text automations, messaging automations. I can build a promo calendar so that I know what merch I'm putting out or what tickets are going on sale throughout an entire calendar year. And then I know where those promos are going to different levels of awareness. I know what offers to make. There's a lot you can do to automate this process once you start knowing where these stages are at, what people are like who actually get into your career at this level of depth. Once you learn about them, you can set it up so that you're not just trying desperately to move people once you notice them.
Right.
It's happening a lot more automatically and a lot more kind of in the background.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are worried about automation because like, well, you're talking about developing relationships with people and then you're going to automate it. Like it seems counterintuitive, like that, maybe one doesn't go along with the other, but it's just not the case, especially if you are putting a lot of you into these automations, which is why we want indies to learn this stuff so that it becomes natural and you're not using templates because yes, templates, if you automate templates, they may not sound like you unless you really inject yourself into it. So the more that you can understand about who these cohorts are, how you should be talking to them, what your voice sounds like as you're talking to people of these different commitment levels, the less that an automation feels like an automation, right? And so that's why I think it might be counterintuitive for you to think like, oh, I'm building relationships with individuals, but at the same time it's automated. But it's like, no, if you inject yourself into that automation, then it's going to accomplish what you're trying to do.
And not only that, like just because you're automating portions of it doesn't mean that you're not going to talk to hundreds of people.
Exactly.
Like I just rewrote, I'm rewriting a bunch of our automations right now for Indepreneur, and these emails are coming out as some of the best copy I've ever written. Why? Not because I've leveled up so much as a copywriter, but because I've talked to hundreds of people who these automations have reached.
Right.
And now I kind of feel a little bit differently about how I want to write it. So now our automations, some of them are starting off with hey, this is an email automation. I wrote this on this day at this time. Here's what was going on in my life. And if we can all be adults about that and agree that that's the case, I'm not going to treat you like an idiot.
Right.
You know that this is an automation, right?
Right. Exactly.
So, and that speaks more to the kinds of conversations that I've had with indies who have received our previous automations. And I'm like, okay, I feel like I can talk to that. These are my friends. I can talk to them in a candid way. So I'm going to do that. So you can inject a lot of humanity into the automation process. We don't want people to get freaked out about automations because it's no, this is going to be a lot more human than most artists with large fan bases are.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is that, we also in the support channel, we get tons of emails back from these automations of, people with different reactions to it. Some of them are positive, some are negative, some are, a lot of them are wanting to tell the company about their experience thus far and talking about what they have found it motivating. And so all of that information is so helpful in us crafting future automations, as Circa's saying, but also crafting the right offers. And then we reply to those people. We welcome the fact that they're replying to that message, even though it's an automation, and we respond to them in real time to basically we're affirming that they've done something that will result in the thing that they want, which is a personal in-time response. So that's always something that you can, keep that in mind. Like if you're running automations, you should also be checking your inbox or checking your, whichever messenger or mail or whatever, form you're using. Check your inbox and get back to those people. Don't assume that the conversation is over because you sent something out and they responded and you're like, great. Like use that information that they're giving you and adapt in the future, as well as give them that little, treat of you responding to them so that they know, okay, this is a real person, even if it, wasn't in real time necessarily the very first thing I got from them.
The ultimate goal of all this is to have an end-to-end system where you're doing updating to the system. You're not building out this stuff ad hoc all the time.
Right.
Because a lot of people get stressed out, like, how am I going to do this all the time? It's like, you're not. You're going to build economies of scale. When Indepreneur started, I was doing that and managing an artist's digital marketing, and it sucked because I had to kind of like scramble to get everything done. But as you get momentum, you get these automations going, you start to get a feel for all the UIs that you're using and all the tech that you're using, everything becomes easier. And then like you build up a large structure underneath you over time. And it's really fun. Like once you get into it, as a lot of our indies know, like it's really fun to start saying, oh, okay, I see where all these stages are at. I've got fan bases in these stages. And you can start to construct your plan for kind of filling out your pipeline of audience. And that's kind of the whole goal of all this.
Yeah. I mean, a funny story, and I'm going to have to talk in broad terms because I can't disclose everybody, but I was working with an IndieX client, and this was a while back, who ended up meeting with a major label and their distributor. And so we were talking about ManyChat. And at the time, ManyChat was a lot less, and even still, I mean, ManyChat or messenger bots in general are not used widely in the music industry, but they were even a little bit covert. What is that? Covert. Words. They were a little bit covert, even, just to a lot of awareness, right, of how users were using Messenger at the time. And so we were talking about the cool things that you could do, and we had done, the executive was like, yeah, you fine, but this isn't scalable. And it's like, well, we had over 8,000 people come into this in the last month. And he was like, wait, what? And we were like, yeah, it's definitely scalable. And so it was really funny that he, immediately was like, yeah, maybe for an artist with like 100 people, but you can't automate that at a scale level. And I don't know why that was the assumption he had, but it absolutely is scalable. And what's wonderful is that when we started these messenger campaigns for this artist, there was no one in that list, and the fan base was very, very small. Like I think probably about 1,000 likes on the page, right? So really grassroots. And by the time he was done, he now has over 17,000 messenger subscribers and has, probably 50,000 likes or followers, whatever, on the Facebook page. Not that we care that much about that vanity metric, but that's a huge ratio. The fact that 17,000 of the people who are, of the 50,000-ish who are following the page, that's a huge conversion. That's very scalable. And to this day, even though Messenger has changed quite a bit in what you can do with it and broadcasting and delivery and all of that, he still uses it to generate, whether it's for tours, whether it's for just general education. He uses those audiences because he knows already that they were different from the people who are just seeing everything that he's posting, right? He knows that, all right, these people at least engaged with the messenger bot at least once, right? Or they wouldn't be in here. And now I can speak to them differently. And it absolutely, I've seen it. It's absolutely scalable.
Yeah. And I mean, that like Messenger is such a new technology that came in while we were kind of building out Indepreneur over these last 3 years. Shout outs to our birthday.
Yeah.
But,
Woot woot.
but yeah, like because we have a framework for understanding, because like just like we would use this for any artist that we work with, we use this for our own business. Like this is how Indepreneur runs, is largely based on the buddy system. And so, you know, any new technology that comes online is like new marketing technology, new capability. We can put it in its proper place. We can know exactly how we're going to use it because you can, by process of elimination, understand who it's not right for in the buddy system. Mm-hmm. And because we don't try to get people who have never heard of us before into a one-to-one communication channel, we typically front load any opt-in to Messenger or email with content. So we know Messenger is not right for introduction stage, or maybe not even right for education stage, although in some cases that's not true. And like recently we got a contest platform, like last year we got a contest platform, and we know how to use that contest platform to address people at different stages in the buddy system. We can introduce ourselves with a contest. We can nurture existing audience with a contest. We can't generate sales with a contest. Right. So it doesn't work for these later stages, but we can generate referrals, right? So we can, by process of elimination, figure out how any new capability, any opportunity, if we get, you know, some press or whatever, we can address these opportunities, these capabilities, and route them to the appropriate channels.
Right.
So the buddy system is really a framework that can help you structure any business. We've modified it to be more about creative businesses, but certainly it applies. It applies anywhere. Right. And learning it is how you get to a place where you don't need us anymore. That's really what we want for you. We don't want you to have to listen to my stupid voice. We want you to, we want you to be out there trying new ideas, teaching us what works, and that's really what our community thrives on, which is why we feel it's so necessary that people really understand this underlying concept.
Yeah, that's why I'm so high on the founder program, because like this last class, for instance, a lot of the students were, because for our Black Friday sale, obviously our annual members, they know Black Friday is coming, right? They know. And so we decided to change it up a little bit. And I think this was actually, Cirque, this was your idea, I think. But we were like, well, hey, why don't we offer them something cool where they can get founder along with their annual and really up the ante? And it was amazing because now we have people in there like, shout outs to Joe Stam and Greg Owens, like these guys who have been with us. I mean, they're like, back when we were on ClickFunnels days, right? So they've been doing this stuff for years. And the kinds of things that they were bringing to the assignments was just so eye-opening as to what is possible when you've got people who have been embracing this for so long. And frankly, I was shocked that I was like, why did you even feel like you needed founder? But really, but we were still able, fortunately, to, help them elevate, obviously. And then we've got people from who the first thing they ever did. And I know I've mentioned her before, but Gracie Phillips, who was in our first 8-week session and is now an employee at Indepreneur, and killing it with her music stuff. She's got releases planned this year, and she's really embraced the whole psychology of it and is thinking about her fans in these cohorts, in these segments. And so it's amazing when you really understand why you're doing what you're doing and not just executing on a technical level, the things that are possible, and then how you're helping the community. So I kind of feel like Joe Stam maybe could have been like, nah, I don't need you guys anymore. He could have. And we would be happy if that were the case. Like if he was like, nah, I'm totally good. Thank you for, everything, but I don't need to pay for this anymore. Fortunately, he's still in a place where he just wants to learn more, but I don't think any of us would object to someone becoming a master of this and no longer needing Indepreneur, because that at that point, that means that you've reached a success level where you understand and you're going to maintain campaign. And, you know, you don't really need us to do that. You know, we want to create independent musicians, so who are making a living. So I think that's something that the founder program has really exposed to me, is that, you know, there are people who are really embracing this. And then when they come into founder, you know, really more than anything, we're just consulting on creatives and like helping them make decisions that are far above and beyond outside the training based on their knowledge of their fan base. And, you know, to me, that's just really inspiring, because I love to see the progression of people who have really just started to understand why they're doing the things they're doing, and just helping them, you know, discover even more little facets of how to make differences and what objectives they're optimizing for, and how they're speaking to these different people, and what segments they could, you know, cut in half and actually speak to that segment differently, because there's multiple levels of ascension, you know. So I think that's just been really, really fun for me to watch, because the people who do that are successful.
Yeah. And it's taken us a long time to build up to the 12 trainings we do have, which kind of shows you that like we can, even as our team grows, we can only really scratch the surface of all this.
Right.
We can only really, you know, do so many applications of the buddy system that are going to be relevant to like a wide spectrum of different artists, which is what we require, right? If it doesn't work for like a lot of different types of artists, we can't really teach it as much. And so
right.
It's important that people develop this to a point where if someone asks you what you're doing to get these gains in your creative career, you're not pointing them to our resources first. Right. You're saying, let me explain something to you. Right? And you're kind of giving them that first touch from your experience and explaining to them how they can think about this stuff. And then, you know, then you maybe, you know, give us some credit or not. Right. Because ultimately we want this stuff to get out there. We want people to start thinking about this. We need tons of independent musicians to start understanding how this can be valuable to their career. Because we need independent music's market share to swell as much as possible as there's an increasing democratization of the music industry and all creative industries.
Absolutely. I mean, I was on Twitter. Well, I'm on Twitter all the time. Twitter addict. # Twitter addict. But I follow a really great music writer. You should check her out if you don't know her. Her name's Cherie Hugh. She writes a lot of things about, you know, data in the music industry. And I geek out on her stuff constantly. And one thing that she tweeted was a fact from, I think it was from Statistica. Is that what it's called? Anyway, yeah. I'm having trouble. It's a Monday when we're recording this, y'all. So I'm just having trouble. But she posted something that there were 1,800 in the United States who claimed to be full-time independent musicians, as far as like on their taxes. Like that's what they did. That was their occupation. And I'm like, 1,800. Like we have 5 times that just in the Indepreneur training collection of customers, of students in the Indepreneur program. I'm like, how is that so little of a representation? And I think we just want to see that number skyrocket. And it's because it's not that there's only 1,800 musicians. It's that there's 1,800 people who claim that as their primary source of income. And that's what we want to see change. And so that's why we're like, hey, let's just talk about how we're going to achieve that. And I think as a company, you know, getting people to understand like the basics of like running campaigns and then pairing that with the buddy system is just, that's the way we see forward on that, you know? So that's what we're going to keep pursuing.
Yeah. And I said this, I've said this before, I forget where I said it, but look, we're not here saying that, because this is a lot of like business theory and psychology to throw at someone who's like, hey man, I just want to play guitar and write songs or whatever.
Right.
And I totally get that. And we're not here to say that every musician in the world needs to like learn digital marketing and direct response marketing and entrepreneurship. We're not here to say that. We're just here for those who do want to do that. And if that's what you want to do, we're here for you. We've got all the info. We can't wait to tell you what we've been up to and what we've been working on. If that's not you, look, that's cool. There's tons of musicians who do that. And there's no telling how far you can take just that.
Right.
So I'm not here to disparage anyone who decides, oh, this is a lot of theory. There's a lot of stuff going on. Seems like a lot of work. Yeah, it totally does seem like a lot of work. If you don't want to do it, we're probably not a good fit for you. But if you're out there saying, I do want to build kind of an empire around my creativity, and I do want to put in that work, that's what we're here to help you with. And so next episode, we're going to be going in deep on the buddy system for those people.
Yeah, I'm stoked on that. I mean, I think, one of our buddies, Dame Ritter, who's with Music Entrepreneur Club, he says like, that's just part of the job occupation now. Like if you want to be a musician, you have to understand at least some of the basics of marketing and how to talk to your fans. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to be a crazy technician, but you have to know how this stuff works. And, understanding some marketing is essential to being an independent musician now. And he has, run a label and, manages some pretty big artists. And if he thinks that, I'm like, okay, I think it is. I think the job description of being a musician has changed. And even if you decide that you don't want to do a lot of this marketing stuff, I think that you will be able to accelerate faster if you're willing to learn it. You'll probably accelerate faster in ratio to the time that you've invested in putting into marketing as you would if you didn't and weren't executing this stuff. You'll probably spend less time learning than you would trying to make it without knowing this stuff. So I'm still 100% an advocate to like, if you want to be a musician, then you got to know this stuff. It's just part of what the job is now.
Yeah. I mean, that's true if you want to make this like your full-time thing.
Yeah.
And you don't have like a hit or like a massive, like, a pop push, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like that's the case. If you're just trying to like write your personal music, you're not trying to like blow up overnight kind of shit, you should probably learn entrepreneurship and marketing.
Right.
But there's all types of people who fall outside of that classification. So that's why I wanted to just make sure, like, a lot of people hit us up on our ads and be like, musicians shouldn't have to learn all this stuff. It's like, if that's what you believe, that's your truth. I'm not here to tell you that that's not accurate or that you're like less than because of that. Yeah, we're just here for the people who are willing to take on that workload, who are willing to kind of push it forward.
Yeah. I will try not to be judgmental about people who feel, if you're a hobbyist, you still want to break even, right? Like, I guess, some people might make enough money where they can just lose money in their spare time. But I don't know. Even when I started out in music, I was occupied elsewhere. I was still in the military when I started, and it was a hobby for me, and I still did this stuff. So yeah, I get what you're saying, Cirque, and I definitely don't want to calm down on anybody who isn't into it. I would definitely say Indepreneur is not what you need, but at the same time, part of me is like, no, like this is just what it is now, So we'll just have to agree to disagree with some folks, I guess.
Well, no, I just mean to say that there's a lot of people who, if that's what it takes, they're not interested, and it's like that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I feel you.
Yeah. But anyways, for those who are interested, who do want to kind of wake up early and go to bed late like us
yeah,
and learn all this nerdy shit, then we'll be back next episode with kind of a deeper dive into the different stages of the buddy system and the data sets that correspond to them and the campaigns that we typically run in order to address them.
Can't wait.
Hell yeah. And we'll see you then.